The year was 1949. China's population was 550 million, and the Communist Party under Mao had just seized control, bringing a sudden host of vast and dramatic changes. In order to increase productivity, large families and more children were strongly encouraged. In this new age of modernization, China's numbers multiplied rapidly. By the 1970s, the population had increased by a colossal 71% to 940 million, with no sign of letting up. As a result of the population surge, China was in a dire situation. Demographers predicted that the population would reach 1.5 billion by the year 2000. Politicians pushed for family planning measures. Still, Mao was against this, saying, "Population control is a means of killing off the Chinese people without shedding blood." When Mao left power in 1976, the population was rapidly nearing 1 billion. In 1979, the new leader of China, Deng Xiaoping, commenced one of the most simplistic and dramatic attempts to regain control of China's soaring population growth in the form of the one-child policy. Taking what seemed like a straightforward approach to the population problem, the official statement read, "Women who give birth to one child will be praised. Women who give birth to 3 or more will suffer sanctions." This was met with mixed reactions. According to surveys taken, 9 out of 10 Chinese couples were opposed to the policy. Outside the borders, though, foreign family planning commissions praised China for taking action in reducing population. It appeared to be direct, simple, and potentially effective. However, the policy supporters had failed to realize its many fundamental flaws. These flaws would ultimately hold tragic results for China.
It was not long before one of the first failures of this government policy came into light. The administration, in their haste, had failed to see that the one-child policy played unfairly against different classes. As Chinese studies professors have noted, rural families struggled under the policy's restrictions, as they needed more farmhands and larger families. They were punished for having their much-needed children, and the fines they paid were then gifted to the rich urban couples, whom due to their busy lives often stopped reproducing at the one-child limit anyway. Furthermore, it was vital that rural couples gave birth to a son, as a son was invaluable for farm work and would care for his elderly parents, a sort of social security. A girl was completely different. Upon marriage, she would become a part of her husband's family and would never return to help her parents in old age. Limited to one child, a girl would spell disaster for a rural family. Tragically, the government had overlooked how desperate rural couples could be for a boy, and what this meant for girls. After a few years, the policy's problems became evident, but were ignored. Facing increasing pressure, officials began resorting to new strategies to meet strict birth quotas. A rushed and vague statement was released, mandating cadres to carry out any policy advantageous to the one-child policy. Many of these policies were efficient, but devastatingly brutal.
One of the most crude and widely employed tactics used by officials, forced abortions, were tragically employed on a massive scale to quickly cap population growth. No one was free from the clutches of abortion. It was often forced upon the unwilling mothers. Under the euphemism of technical measures, doctors rarely hesitated to abort. It was widely known that a woman facing imminent labor could still be forced into a last-minute abortion. There was little hope for those who attempted to resist. In 1982, the policy's coercion peaked, and officials frantic to meet the party quotas and policy requirements resorted to brute force. Resisting women were thrown in cells and tortured until they surrendered to what was often a heartbreaking abortion. Reports told of mothers who hopelessly fought their captors while being dragged to the operating room, where they had to be sedated. Tragically, the abortion was only the beginning. Many of these women and their husbands would be sterilized through a tubal ligation or vasectomy the day afterwards, denying them their reproductive rights. Government records show that within the year 1983 alone, China carried out an estimated 16 million abortions, or 44,000 abortions a day, for every day of the year. There is no question that this helped reduce population levels, but the human cost may have far exceeded the supposed benefits. Never officially acknowledged by the government, infanticide was one of the most grisly strategies used as a last resort to keep numbers within quotas. Reports by American and British journalists described this in hospitals. Infant skulls being crushed or injected with lethal medicine. Facing demotion, salary cuts, or dismissal, doctors had little choice. While effectively lowering population numbers, infanticide was one of the worst human rights violations related to the policy. Furthermore, the hurried enactments of the one-child policy had unwittingly created a high-stakes game of birth roulette, in which couples had only one chance to conceive an overwhelmingly favored boy. A few extreme and desperate parents, faced with no other options, drowned, smothered, or intentionally starved infant girls shortly after birth in order to gain a second shot at the conception game. These numbers were never recorded, and now are only called China's lost girls. But in a sense, the one-child policy had already dug the graves for these innocent victims with its thoughtless planning and flawed execution. There were some children who escaped the horrors of abortion and infanticide, only to be placed into an orphanage. Still, the sheer tragedy that has unfolded within these orphanages is almost unknown to the majority of foreigners. Failing to anticipate the increase of abandoned children, the government-run orphanages during the one-child policy were often disastrously undermanned. These severely inept employees had little to no knowledge of childcare, and subsequently little patience. The children suffered tragically from this. Official records in Shanghai's largest government orphanage showed that 9 out of every 10 children died within 1 year of being admitted, likely due to neglect. Children were sometimes selected for summary resolution, a euphemism for gradual and deliberate starvation. This was a recorded policy carried out in orphanages to reduce the number of children needing attention. Workers did this because they could not care for all of the children. Every one of the summary resolution deaths could easily be twisted in the records to look like a case of natural death. No help came for these children, even as they lay dying and hungry in their last days.
The policy seemed simple at first. Preventing births would equal a lower population and benefit the nation. However, the formula was much more complex in reality, and today, the social costs of this policy are revealing themselves to the world. China's young generation has been suffocated by the draconian grip of the government, and birth rates are at an all-time low. The youth population has shrunk dramatically. Projections show that there will not be nearly enough young workers to support the economy and growing elderly population. Additionally, the male-to-female imbalance was fueled by the one-child policy. Limited to one child, traditional Chinese sexism soon escalated out of control and caused an extreme odium towards girls. Today, there is a very imbalanced ratio of 127 young males to 100 young females. This uneven proportion has turned women into commodities, and even today it is increasingly hard for men to find a wife. As a result, women are being forced into marriages as well as prostitution. Kidnappings are common. In the end, the one-child policy met its target, if numbers were all that mattered. Many outside organizations and family planning committees are still supporters of the policy, quoting the triumphant population decreases. And by all accounts, China has triumphed on the graphs. Beijing reports that the one-child policy has prevented 400 million additional births, all of which allegedly would have posed a monumental burden on the nation. Was it worth the cost? The human toll of the one-child policy has been tremendous. Coercive abortions still take place daily. However, the plight of the Chinese people under the policy is still mostly unknown to the world.
There may be one redeeming quality to the policy. It can be said that urban single children, free of sibling competition, are benefiting tremendously, receiving stellar educations and great amounts of attention. This is a triumph for many, and the next 20 years will see talented, intelligent thinkers emerge from the young Chinese generation of today. Ironically, it may be one of these children that rises up in the future to correct the problems created by the one-child policy. At this point, we must hope so. In spite of the fact that the Chinese government's one-child policy has seen triumph in the most dramatic reduction of birth rates worldwide, the cost to the Chinese people has far exceeded the gains. With its poor planning, disregard for basic rights, and unforeseen tragic aspects, the one-child policy proves that such simple approaches to the population can never work.